all about friendship and love here. No, no, none of that. I thought Alfred is a perfect topic. Can you believe only two more sessions after this? And I thought what we need to do is think about this high point of the Anglo-Saxon period. It's odd in a way that when we think of this period, which gives England its name, Anglo-Saxon, we have to think about the fact that this period, and Alfred died in 899. Yeah, so that's one more you can remember. Yeah, I know. It just keeps adding like interest in your bank account. It's sort of the idea, isn't it, that there is a very, very lengthy period that we call Anglo-Saxon, but as opposed to, say, those who come after, meaning the Normans, we're going to see lots and lots occur. But some of that, of course, has to do with, you guessed it, sources. All that we know that we can demonstrate, because the Anglo-Saxons, as opposed to the Romans, didn't have a lot of archaeological remains for us to consider. So don't rush over there saying, I would love to see some Anglo-Saxon remains, because you won't see a lot. Now, as our dear friend, and many of you know her, Carol Darren, would have said, the Anglo-Saxon literature is a very important source. So always give credit to that. But the fact is that this period, the reign of Alfred, who is supposedly, as we've all read in the books and always stated, I think, if you had this on a fill in the blank and said who was the first king of England, you'd say, I know, Alfred. And then, of course, some picky historian of the Anglo-Saxon period would say, well, sort of, but it wasn't all together. So, strictly speaking, he was king of Wessex and some more territories. You say, picky. And then some impertinent undergraduate would say, do we have to know that? Nothing could be more annoying. But you say, wow, perfect likeness. Olin Mills couldn't do better than that. I'm not so sure. Shall we say romanticized? Shall we say maybe? But more or less the image of the individual who's supposed to be the greatest king. And of course, at one time, they would have said, every English school child knows about Alfred the Great, that sort of thing. I think we can probably say without fear of contradiction, that is long gone. I don't think you need to worry too much about that in the schools. If you even go to London and say, tell us about Alfred, but we won't talk about the condition of history as taught in schools nowadays, but you understand that is not part of the world. If they even knew Clement Attlee and Winston Churchill, I would be happy. All of this then is to say, have I done something wrong?
No.
My ignorance is ever before me.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Okay, the story of how Anglo-Saxons became an English nation is a case of the incredibly expanding areas and the disappearance. Remember, we talked about the Heptarchy, the Seven Kingdoms, and then I think we can think about territorial Darwinism, can't we? Some kingdoms, I mean, they're all equal, but some are more equal than others. And it's like, is that fair? And again, I guess we don't ask the question of fair, it's just reality, because you have these tribal folks and they're not saying, but you can't take this, we'll take you before a court of humanity or something like that. I just don't think that's a. So we've got Mercia, that becomes the major one. I don't think we've mentioned that term Bretwalda yet. All that I think is significant there, because I don't think they really called, oh, you're the Bretwalda, and then you become most congenial, or and you have to take a second place. It's like, I wanted to be Bretwalda. You know how people are. But I think basically this is just something that people in later times would come up with to designate who is the most powerful. I know that's kind of disappointing, but if you find, I'm willing to pay, if you can bet me, if you're into that kind of activity, but we can just have a nice little wager. $1 or $2, that's as high as I can go, but fixed income. The idea being that if you can find a primary source with Bretwalda, you're ahead $2. Yeah. And we don't need to report it, because this just one of those great Anglo-Saxon words, I guess because as first learning that term, I always thought somebody going around and saying, I'm Bretwalda. Everybody, oh, well, you're hot stuff. Yeah. But that's the idea of the kingdoms and Mercia. You see it there in the map. You say, well, why is that area in gray? Well, they're not Anglo-Saxons, so we don't count them. So they're Celts. And if that's that was ugly, but yeah, that's what you get is brand X. We're all about the Anglo-Saxons now. And if you had the misfortune to be a Celt living in that Greenland, it was not good. It wasn't like, reach out, we want to meet. Let's join together and be ecumenical. I think it's pretty much subservient. So if you're ever, as this class proceeds, if you ever want to be sympathetic to Anglo-Saxons, say, oh, did you get hurt? Remember, yeah, they'd abused people before, and so they'll get their turn. So you see the progression of the maps, and again, it's like we are growing. Yeah. And it's growing, of course, at someone else's expense, isn't it? But that's to be expected. Now, this is the 8th century. And of course, we know that's the 700s. And I know you're already excited about 800. I know, because you all have known so much genealogy. And Christmas Day of 800 will really be titillating for you. Yes, yeah. Because we have the summa cum laude of all dates, historical genealogy. I've done it again, Frank.
All right.
I feel so.
Don't touch the mouse.
Don't touch it. All right.
Don't touch the mouse. Use this. There you go.
Oh. There he is. Thank you. And Charlemagne. Yes. Remember the coronation of Charlemagne, December 25th, 800? Of course you do. over and over again. We've had that date in history. So remember it, cherish it. Say, I'll never forget that.
It will be on the test.
Yeah. Yes. And help others. If there's anybody out there in Christendom who does not know that date, you make sure you say, but why would we be concerned? Well, that's the interesting thing to me. We actually have correspondence between him and the kingdom of Mercia. And that's like saying, as of 796, they had correspondence, and it's like, wow, Charlemagne actually corresponded with him. Having a Frankish pen pal must have been a big, big deal for the king of Mercia. I don't know. I think it was all Charlemagne, don't you? I mean, not to say the Franks are better than Anglo-Saxons. I love them both. They're both great people. But I'm just saying that it seems a lot to put on when you think about the significance of the correspondence that this king offered is celebrated because of that. You look it up in the textbook or any book, really. But Anglo-Saxons, they always mention that, and it's like, wow, cool guy. He got letters from Charlemagne. I mean, it's not like they were close, okay? They were writing about their merchants and trade, so it wasn't like, I really care about you, and how we can always be close like this. Maybe we can go out and have drinks, that kind of thing. No, this is more like a business arrangement. But that said, he was more or less thought of, to use our term again, so the Bretwalda, because there must have been some Frankish relationship with the Anglo-Saxons at that time, which is not surprising when we think about, remember the marriage of the Frankish princess to the Anglo-Saxon king way back when. And she kept saying, you don't convert, you go into HELL. Remember that? Everybody, Ethelbert, yeah, you're. So thank goodness for retention. We want to have that in case we put you on jeopardy on behalf of Ollie. Yeah. Building fund, yeah.
Touch the mouse.
Oh,
Use the thing. There you go.
this one.
Use that one, please.
Yeah, well, let's put this up here so I can say, yeah. And now we get these wonderful military maps because here come the big V. We love those Vikings. I don't know why, but I guess it's because they've been so romanticized over the years. And we love Copenhagen and Stockholm, and you think about can't get enough of Oslo. I just love all those nice people. They've come a long way since these days, okay? I mean, we talk about pacification, right? Because I think their ancestors were a little bit unruly. Now, that said, the Anglo-Saxons were, after all, as we like to say in the country, kissing cousins. Right? You've heard that term before. But even with that, people do like to fight. And this is not the complete story by any means, because this was about to come even during Charlemagne's reign, which we know began as emperor in December of 800. And it's not to be forgotten. That said, I mean, it's like, I don't think he could have understood the significance of seafaring people attacking his kingdom, but he would learn during his latter years. He died in 814, and certainly his heirs would get the brunt of it, because for them, I suppose, the kingdom of Charlemagne, the Carolingian Empire on the continent, and then, of course, the Anglo-Saxon, shoot, that was ripe for taking. Because, well, you guess the reason. I mean, the speculation has been endless. Imagine going to a Viking historical conference. Oh, yeah. I bet they have cocktails there. You might need a lot to drink. I mean, if you just prefer to have ginger ale, I'm sure they would understand. But you would need to think about, what are they going to talk about? Oh, let me tell you. This is purgatory because it will end. But they will discuss every possible motivation for the Viking coming into the various areas they did, including England. And one of them, of course, will be stronger Viking kings who try to bring law and order, or maybe they're seeking warmer climates, greater food supplies. You think of, how do they know that, say you? I think you're quite right, but hey, we got to get tenure, so we got to write about something. So you know how that goes. Yeah. I mean, it's like when you read some of this stuff, you'll be amazed. People stick themselves out and say a lot of things economically, socially, and the king, some Olaf type, stands up and says, you pirates, you better behave, or and then they say, well, we're leaving then. We're going marauding. Whatever the case, I thought the arrows were very interesting and very telling in terms of the going to those kingdoms, and of course, over time. And we are talking now about the 9th century, because Charlemagne dies in 814. And it's already started. And it will not be just the continent, but wherever the Vikings, coastal stop, and they'll say, gosh, it's so warm down here. Like folks going, years ago, some of you remember when folks started going south, snowbirds, they called them. And I think this is sort of like, wow, England, and like, wow, tan city. Man, it's so unlike up north. Yeah, that's cold. And you think, I don't really think of England as being exactly where I would need the copper tone, but it's amazing, isn't it, to think about in terms, I guess it's all comparison. If you think about, especially way down south, Brighton or somewhere like that. Some of you been there, sort of like Coney Island, or England's version of Coney Island. It didn't do much for me, but the idea of these areas, again, along the coast, and as Frank pointed out, they were not too impressed by the monasteries in a faith way, because after all, they were pagans. They had their own gods, and they saw enormous reserves of wealth. Imagine the icons and other sources of potential wealth. So they were quite rough, and I'm thinking even about the house of Venerable Bede. Remember, he's long gone by now. So his house, and they're not going like, oh, well, if this was a obedient place, we need to really be historical preservation. I just don't think that was an issue. because that's way up here in Northumbria. So all of these areas then will be sources for pillaging. And then I guess you go home and you say, "Hon, maybe it's time to talk about moving. I found a place with great weather, not so much good food, but yeah, let's not push. But great weather, opportunities for advancement, and who knows what else." It is hard to explain this again, but they do it at Viking conferences. So if you are interested, the idea though is that after decades, the looting and pillaging turns into settlement. And that is in itself an interesting phenomenon, because doesn't it make you sort of wonder about how it all took place? At least I think about it sometimes, because obviously, gosh, if you had a diary, dear diary, Helga and I got down here, and this has been a wonderful experience. I think it's drawn us closer together, sharing the adventures down south, that sort of thing. Can you imagine all the dissertations or theses you could get out of that? Viking love in Anglo-Saxon England or something of that sort. I don't know. But we don't know. But we do know there's a lot of migration down south. And again, snowbirds or better opportunities. So they come down, and I don't think they're nice to Anglo-Saxons. Yeah. And Anglo-Saxons, who are now the dominant element, succumb in large part to the attacks. And now for an even closer map, well, at least I thought so, we could see, and of course you see Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and I think that's sort of like putting a modern label on this and making us think about our good friends up there and modern times. But basically, the places where the people are encamping, see how they're going around, see Ireland over there, and all these folks, the Celts, have to deal with them. And they settle there. And then, of course, we always remember the Normans, because they were Normans equals Norseman. Get it? Yeah. And until you think about it, you have to realize the Norsemen, they caught on fast. They got in there, and you know what the French did? They said, "We're so glad to have you. Welcome. How would you like to have some land and settle down? And can we bring a clergyman to talk to you about faith?" And it was real fast. And the French king said, "Would you like, in addition to our faith traditions, would you also like to marry my daughter?" So, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like, it's a quick, I mean, and that's how the beginnings of the Duchy of Normandy, if you want to know the truth, it's quite an interesting story. But more of that later. So we got Ireland, you see all the red, and see all those little arrows, and you think, Lord, that's unfortunate for Anglo-Saxons. Yes, it is, because it's not like, can we work together on this? I just think this is going to be a constant kind of warfare. And if these folks have the naval authority that obviously I think they do. And Anglo-Saxons probably have lost much of whatever they had in the past. Because remember, we've been here a long time, and I'm not sure they were as adept at that. So this is like an ongoing problem for the Anglo-Saxons. So we say a farewell to what was left of the heptarchy, as you can imagine. Oh, look at the pink. That's areas taken over by Danes. And you say, well, that's great. All these nice folks. I'm sure they were nice to each other, but I'm not sure if you were Anglo-Saxon, they were very nice. But I don't think if you were Anglo-Saxon, you had much room to talk. Because remember, your ancestors acted kind of ugly to the Celts. I'm not sure they thought about things in those ways, but I'm sure that if I were an Anglo-Saxon, and that's a big area, we call it Danelaw. You may know this because I know many of you have traveled a lot over there. The Wiltshire area, because that is the area that was actually taken over by the Danes, and they were saying, we're in charge now. You better move on. And I don't think if you stop in and say, could we talk to you about our faith traditions, and would you like maybe be baptized, have a confirmation class or something? No, I think they were hardcore pagans. So that's going to take some time, as we're going to see. But that's called the Danelaw. And you say, wow, where's our heptarchy? As the child would say, going bye-bye. Because you don't see it, do you? Yeah, we're going to miss you, Northumbria. Mercia. It's all memories the way we were. So you can go back to the old maps and say, man, that's a lot of pink. And you were very right. But you see that in Ireland and along the coast of Scotland. And that would be under Danish authority. Now, I don't think there's some central bureau from Copenhagen who is enforcing Danish traditions. I think it's basically going to be catch as catch can. So I'm not sure how accurate the maps are, but I think it's close enough for our purposes to understand that during the course of the 9th century, much of the Danes, much of the Anglo-Saxon territory was now occupied by Danes. And while I presume Celts and Anglo-Saxons were still there, they were there in a, shall we say, subservient role. Danish spoken here. Okay. So, I mean, it's like, and I would like to say that I heard about Danish 101 courses being offered, but I've never known a Dane who couldn't speak English, to be honest with you. And maybe you have, but all of the Danes I knew spoke English. And it's like when I took one student and she said to the clerk, oh God, you cringe, you die a little bit inside. She said, what is that in real money? Yeah. Yes. Yes. I know. The thought of it is hurtful. And now, yeah, I was stronger then, but I could take things better. Ooh, okay. But anyway, Danish, the language, I'm sure, is a very fine language. I don't think it's easy. So if you want to take a course over Zoom or something, get ready. It's going to really be hard. But basically, they must have come in and imposed their dominance. I mean, I guess Anglo-Saxons pursue there, but you would definitely second class because you are not the ruling class, except in one little area. And that's, of course, Wessex. So that's the kingdom that will be so very, very important in that time. I think maybe that would be a good time. Could you let them have a little break now?
Early, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're gonna take a break. It's 3:04. So why don't we come back at 3:14?
Yeah.
And everybody go have a cup of coffee.
Drink more or drink more coffee, that is.
These guys, when they got all my family, things that happened, riding with the cap.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Got that done. Here we go.
Yeah, it's cold.
Okay. You always call it going. Yeah.
Every other morning.
Yeah, I got a person to come here for a long time.
No.
Yeah, well, you're a physical.
This is the time of year, they were short, you got. Like a sweatshirt. I know. Unless you work in that gym, they're always hot. I used to get, now I just. Have this when you get older. Are you teaching a class?
I heard a brown bag January, then I'll probably be developing a new class for fall. That's my thinking. I wanted to do something completely new. I couldn't do the technology class again because I haven't done that in 5 years.
I need to know how.
With military technology. I don't know if you should roll with that. I did a class a while ago, back in the pandemic. Internet safety. And basically, trying to get people to understand they need to have password managers. Their dog's name, like every.
Click on suspicious links and you're.
All same password.
Yeah. Father-in-law got scammed, taking master. Of course, he owns scams. You and he actually believed this guy that said he can get his head jails and and yes, he said it would be $600 for 2 tickets, but they had to pay for it. He went and bought all these different cards and scratched off. Then he scratched off. And the guy got so mad. He was so mad. I get text all the time saying. You have your package, you need to pay for the rest of it. Anyway.
AI is there. They're recording of it, so you have so modern recording of that is 20%. Yeah. Duplicate the voice of AI.
Yeah, I've been kidnapped. So this morning I'm taking a moving class.
together. They're
He's very.
buried down.
Oh,
They do.
it went to A.
their own thing on Yeah, that's what professors aren't too happy about.
Go in and ask him.
I got to do an argument.
He was going to argue on A.
Yeah. I told her it was wrong.
You know, I wanted.
It's like, no, no, no.
Not really AI, they're not making it.
Right.
They're just going out and pulling information out of here and you search for example, you find information.
It's like when you're adults, yes.
And what it does now is different, is it'll also like white paper.
Yeah, it will read. Yeah.
But I mean,
But it's copying someone else's work.
not necessarily copying what we write. Okay, so I asked him, what's the joke? I said,
No, it's whatever.
the garbage in your, I asked him, so, you know, copying all the carriers. Chicago and Viking were not at Pearl Harbor. They were in Finland. And they were in Japan. Okay, well, no, they're part of that, they're part of
Somebody didn't do their own.
Finally, I can tell him it's wrong. And I said, well, I agree with this. I don't want to argue with the law and this conversation.
I wasn't even ready. It's like AI, like racist clever, like.
I'm somebody that fits in primarily used it's created by a company called Viking. Function, I see the video. Yeah, I got it. I closed I went 10 to 1. So, it's like I point. I won't mention the other time.
Yeah, you know, so for every one you earn, you just.
Yeah, I'm big on that. Big deal.
It's strange.
That's the problem with Iraq, but then it's gone back up, so, but I dumped it all. Dumped some of it for like.
I never seen this. You know what we're talking about? Yeah, that's. They're not gonna like it, right? Spaceship.
Well, the other issue with it is they got, thing with people last time I was somebody came, I stand. There you go.
You want any requests? Well, maybe you wanted to tell them.
If you're gonna be a quiet man.
Oh.
Play it while they're saying.
I'm on, I'm on like, John.
My favorite genre is where you play Genghis Khan. So it's- No, it's my favorite. My mother did not suckle me to be killed by barbarians. Oh, that's
I don't know why.
quality stuff there. Terrible. All right, hey, I'm running back to work.
Six was. Big.
Antonio Fraser.
No, it's a book. Oh, I start back.
Go.
All right. So there we are. We say goodbye, Heptarchy, and hello, Dane Law. And all of this again in the 9th century. Yes. It's hard to date it specifically, but I think that's close enough. If you were to say about the first half of the 800s, and then you think about Charlemagne's descendants, and you do all this comparative genealogical studying and all of that, you'll get close enough in terms of time. The idea, I think, of statuary and how he's been built up over the years. I mean, he was grand, we know that. And the stories that are told that he was pious, but as a youth, somewhat licentious. And I think we've known youth like that. So it's not as if this is unusual, but I guess he's never been made a saint that I know of, but that's okay. He is definitely makes the top rung of the kings of England, I would say. In any event, he was of the royal line of kings of Wessex, but apparently his older brother died, so that is the way he became the king. However, I think the fact that he was such a patron of the faith as he grew older has helped to enhance his reputation, as well, of course, as the friend of scholars, because that gets you a nice write-up in the history books. Remember that, because not surprisingly, kings and queens come and go. But to really get that sort of nice write-up, ratemykings.com, 5 stars, you got to be really good to the church because they are the ones who are writing the history. And it appears that you just could not beat Alfred's reputation, because not to say that other kings were not okay, but his reputation was quite sterling. I think particularly interesting in terms of the tradition is we see him as kind of military, and yet look what he's carrying. It looks to me like a manuscript writing. So he is the king of scholarship, but no pacifist. He's prepared to wield justice. And this is the justice that must come by arms. The tales, oh God, this term is so textbookish, isn't it? The Valley Forge Athelney. I don't think this is a place you necessarily want to visit there in Wiltshire. It was, I think it's due to in the environment or ecology, whatever it is now attached to the land, but at once it was an island. And apparently, as a young king of Wessex, when he was being besieged by Danes, he ended up retreating here to involve himself in contemplation and tactical rearrangements in order to be prepared for, shall we say, a counteroffensive. The tales that deal with Athelney and so forth, I don't think have led to any great museum in that area, but it's an interesting story of his staying there, which I suppose would have lasted for several weeks or months. But again, it's strategically useful for him and to know where to go from here. Because after all, he could have just given up and said, can I be an honorary Dane and hang out with you all? But he didn't. And he resisted. But this is not necessarily a place that would make the top 10 tourist sites, as you can tell. Another story, which of course is jazzed up for the purpose of Alfred books, and I would say a very low level Alfred book at that, because this is kind of, I hate to use this word, but I will, cheesy. But yeah, you'll give me that. I mean, A Child's Guide to Alfred the Great. And then we can understand. But the idea is that he stayed in the home of peasants. Now, this great warrior, this great king, and they don't know who he is. You know, Alfred disguised as a mild-mannered fella and just hanging out. And she said, look, I got to run some errands. So you just watch out. Maybe I'm going to a cocktail party. I don't know. Whatever it is, she had something on the hearth. And he is, of course, thinking military strategy and allows the bread to burn. She really gets on to him when she gets back. And again, the stories are wonderful. How much truth there is. There was a biography written of him by a Bishop Welch, if you can believe it, named Asar. And these stories are included. And we wonder sometimes if maybe, well, this is a little cynical, but did he benefit in any way by being as told to, but it's a great source, ASSAR, maybe you can get a penguin of it. But according to this, he was busy contemplating the future. He just couldn't keep up with temperatures for baking. So she was vexed, irritated, so forth. And she wasn't like, oh, sir, I didn't realize. But yeah, that's supposed to show, I guess, his humility and his basically focus on his great duty, which was to save England from those nasty Vikings. Guthrum he always gets a bad rap, and I guess he deserves it. But Guthrum was the chief leader of the day. And again, do I need to say he was heroic, great warrior, but as we like to say, hardcore pagan. And until that time, Guthrum had been very successful, but he met his match. And that, of course, is one of the most famous incidents. Again, like those who like battle history and all of that, we would always think of this particular one, the Battle of Edington, which is over there in the Wiltshire area, in the east. Because at that battle, notice the date, 878. So you say, well, gee, that's 78 years after the coronation of Charlemagne. You know that, I know that. And we will need to make sure all of our friends know that too, yeah. Because we want to share. Never keep this to ourselves. So 878, at this battle, and again, I'm not sure that this is some big tourist site. I would doubt it. But at this particular area, I'm sure t-shirts, mugs, I don't know. Can you imagine? Send a postcard from that particular area. But whatever the case, Alfred prevailed, and it does not appear there had been a lot of occasion for an English, dare I say it, English instead of Anglo-Saxon, victory against the Danes. But at that battle, supposedly Guthrum was put in his place. And it's embarrassing if you're a Dane. Think about what your parents would say, or, you're not the Viking your father was. Yeah, that's what, that's, guilt trip. And you let an Anglo-Saxon beat you. Yeah. You're kind of a loser. Yeah. But that is, according to the story, that then Guthrum comes and says, okay, Alf, you won. You won. So what's up for me? I'll tell you what's up for you, Big G. You're going to get some water on your head. What do you mean? Baptism. And I've always found that very fascinating. Why baptism? Because, no confirmation classes, no. You don't have to do all the other stuff that normal Catholics do to get ready. You say, why do you want it? I'll tell you what I think. I know you die, you find out. I think it's because of perjury. Yeah. Because if a pagan lies under oath, well, they're going to hell anyway. So, it's not like, but it get them under baptism. Yeah. Then you're in a heap of trouble. That's just my theory, because I'm not so sure we always worried about Guthrum's soul, but he had them. And this is another cheesy representation, I think you would say. The idea being that Alfred acted as his godparent. And you're thinking, really? Again, it's just so hard to accept, but there you are. The idea, and I don't think it, Guthrum said, oh, today is the first day of the rest of my life. I find it so, I'm so cynical, please forgive me. But I just really find it hard to believe Guthrum is, I just, a heart going to church or something like that. But I think Guthrum, made the deal. He said, okay, back east we go. Dane law, here we come. Because Alfred has preserved Wessex. I'm not sure that either individual was altogether prepared for this. But I do know that so much happened during the reign. Some of it, of course, might be what the lawyers call hearsay in the sources, such as they are. Mention out the Assad's account of Alfred, and of course, you remember the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which I'll come back to. So these can't be proven, but they're always cited in the books. So just to note them, the creation of the burghs, if you will, and from the German burghers and bourgeois French, or the idea of towns beginning as military fortifications. Now, there were already towns and cities, but not that many during Anglo-Saxon England, because remember, much of what the Romans had is long gone. I mean, I wouldn't even say ghost towns. I'd just say they abandoned so long ago. So the burghs are there not for the development of urban life, because there's not enough trade, not enough activity. But the burghs become significant in the future because they are erected, they are military fortifications, and they will, of course, eventually become significant for an urban way. The second is even more, shall we say, debatable. The idea that Alfred had the beginnings of a navy. It's often mentioned, it can't be proven. But whenever it was, it would have been significant. I think some people feel that there was some attempt to keep up with the Danes by having a sort of naval force of sorts. That's why I use the word elementary. And then, of course, the deer furred. We never forget the furred. And this, of course, is the Anglo-Saxon military tradition of being able to have the, as they used to say, citizen army. And they used to use this, by the way, as an example in colonial times of the Minutemen, the idea that the Anglo-Saxons would fight for 6 months, and then for the other 6 months, they would be there working alongside their peasants, I guess, in the crops and doing all their various domestic tasks. So again, we've talked about the furred, I think, before in terms of Germanic traditions, but it's particularly important here in trying to understand. And again, I'm not, these just are ordinary people. I don't think they're peasants so much as they are landowners. I might mention that we do have some law codes which supposedly come from the reign of Alfred. And in those law codes, they use the term, I would never call you this, and if I did, you would knock me down. A churl. You say I am not. I'm very sensitive. I don't call people churls. And that's good too. That's why my face is in. One face, I don't get knocked down. But actually, a churl is just someone who might have a bit of land, and so it's sort of like a peasant. And now the term, well, it's not something you want to call people to be churlish. Yeah, it's not a good thing. But a churl, I mean, Alfred's law codes and so forth is full of references to churls. And they even mention Alfred's Vergale. You remember that? The Vergale, how much are you worth? Because he says, oh, shucks, I'm just a thing. I'm just one of y'all. Which is really cuts down on your Vergale, but who knows? Maybe that's kind of good. Wanted dead or alive, that kind of thing. Whatever the case, law codes are often very important. In any event, the third is very significant in this way. Here's another illustration that I doubt has much relevance to reality, but that is supposedly him, and I guess in his 40s, boy. More or less, it's interesting to note that Guthrum, with his baptism behind him, retreats to the Danelaw with his fellow Danish pirates, and Alfred is going to rule. Look, 884, actually, during those years, he actually must have controlled London. And London was probably like Opelika as it used to be. So I'm not thinking, I mean, it's love Opelika. It's not nothing wrong with Opelika. Say maybe 20,000 back in, you remember back when Opelika was in a small place. So it wasn't exactly bustling, unless you're at the mill. But London was still London. So he had it, but ultimately Guthrum and the Danes got it back. And you're going to say, gosh, did he have to go to confession about that? He was very naughty. I don't think, I'm just not one. I always wonder about, again, the idea of the Danes becoming Christianized overnight. I think it's a slower process, shall we say. In any event, there's good old Guthrum, and presumably Guthrum passed on in some violent way. But the area of the Danelaw, and again, this is just simply means it's an area ruled by Danish customs, Danish traditions. So if you're Anglo-Saxon, well, Lord knows, a Celt, you are definitely second, third class. And the Danes are in charge. The whole idea to me of the area and how it gradually integrated is a fascinating one. But that is not something that is well known. And all of this is going on now in the latter 9th century. You say, gosh, or latter 10th century in the 900s. As the period goes on, and we'll find out shortly where all this goes. Here are some others. Again, we don't know exactly the role of Alfred in it, but of course, in the biographies by the good bishop, he's given lots and lots of credit. But again, if you're at his court, because he was still alive when he was writing it, and I'm not a sycophant, but you understand when you read books and you think, well, what else would he say? It's not going to be exactly give a critical overview, not while the man's alive. I mean, so basically he is very, very supportive. And this, of course, will have to do, you guessed it, with that Benedictine rule. And why is that so important? Well, the Danes acted kind of ugly to monks. And monasteries like that of the Venerable Bede are long gone. I'm not saying all monasteries were destroyed, but a lot were. So basically, he sponsors the renaissance of the monasteries because that is the only way they understood scholarship could be maintained. So all of that is like putting a big burden on monasteries. But again, no surprise in this kind of society because they always say there's nobody else to do it. So if it's not done by the monasteries, and it was part of the rule, you can get a copy of the rule and it will explain the responsibility of scholarship and humility and all the rest. Obedience. How much was Alfred involved? Let's just say supportive. Because that gets you out of any kinds of specific problems about, is he going around and he hadn't got any money to pour in. By the way, you know what Virgils were based on? Animals. Which is kind of interesting when you think about a truly primitive society. In any event, some say, and again, this could be quite a overstatement, but that he supported the establishment of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. You say, wow, that late. You're talking about late 9th century. That's what is said. How could that be? Well, again, I'm doing a lot of supposing today, but it appears that maybe the monks were actually relying on notes and citations their predecessors had made, and they'd been put away. So that's the only way to explain how they have information, because this goes on till the 12th century. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, very odd when you think about it, that it will go on, but it does. And as it does, of course, you have better sources. But this very, very important source, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, seems to have begun in this period. Now, they'll make references, but when I say 476, I know there are a lot of people in here who get very excited because you think about Rome, the fall of Rome, supposedly, and the Goths and all the rest of it, Romulus, Augustulus, and all. Not that that's important, it's just to understand they will record little things, little tidbits like that, and you just say, you have a lot of sticky notes, and you say, oh yeah, why do we put that in? And they, I don't think there's much, somebody gets murdered, or we throw that in. So there's a lot of rated R material in there, the killing and so forth. But again, there's a lot of that in history. But the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle does seem to be full of that, but it's important. And when you think if it did begin, initiated under the patronage of Alfred, then that would be another reason to praise him. Now, how much did Alfred do himself? And I think that's fascinating. The idea of Alfred saying, look, I love Latin as much as the next person. I've never had a declension or conjugation that I could get enough of. I'm absolutely insatiable for Latin. And then you're thinking, really? I know. And you think, those darn English. But that is an issue they came up with. And the issue is basically, how do we get this wonderful information from Latin to English? And according to the sources, what home would not want a copy of B? Venerable B. Every home should have one. Yeah. But do we want it in Latin? You say, of course. Well, I'll be honest with you. Don't mean to shock you. My versions in English. I'm not proud of that, but that's all I can do. Now, could I do it in Alfred's English? Probably not. Probably not. Do you remember, did you do Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in the original English? You're a good one.
Yeah, I didn't get it very well.
Bless you. You are venerable. But the idea is these works, the works of Pope Gregory, I want to call it greatest hits. I mean, the works that when he wrote on the pastoral care, how to be a good minister, or the dialogues, which were famous incidents, like the story of him as a young man who went out as a lone celibate monk and was tempted by evil, so he wallowed in the briars to get over his lust, so would never come back. And these are some of the, I know, not good dialogues that he tells stories to illustrate various points. And last but not least, a friend of every student of Philosophy 101, Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy. You remember he was the Christian who talked about philosophy coming to him as a goddess and saving him. He was on death row, and the Gothic king had a bad experience and took it out on poor Boethius. And Boethius writes about the significance of philosophy. All of this is just to say that all of this was now put in English, the Anglo-Saxon language. And again, people say, well, maybe Alfred did it himself. Well, that's a nice idea, but again, how do we know? Can we really trust the source? But all of this was going on during his reign, so can we say he's, and again, the cop-out, the patron of translating major works of Latin into the English language. So I guess if you were taking a course in early English literature, you would definitely have much to say about Alfred and his role there. I don't know, I don't think anybody does, whether or not he was personally involved. Seemed like to me he was pretty busy trying to keep control. But the rest of the period is more or less concerned with his descendants trying to maintain the authority, the English royal authority that he had established. But the Danes are relentless. Christian, they have their, you get Danish masses or whatever they do. Well, they're in Latin, but all of this, and again, he gets a nice write-up, not like great granddad, but it's not bad. Edgar, you notice his dates. You say, gosh, we're getting so close. I know, next week. But not today. This is Edgar. They don't know about those Normans like you do. Right now, they're just thinking about establishing as best they can their authority in Wessex, because it's very, very difficult to say, oh, let's just England and the Danes, let's all just come together. I'm not thinking in the 10th century we're ready for that. Edgar, though, apparently wants the peace as he can get it. And there is more or less, what do they say, modus vivendi. We get along, but not necessarily like each other. So they generalize and understand. Again, nice write-up from the church. Nice write-up. You see, Frank the Peaceful. Yeah, see, you would get a great title. You know, you've already been called venerable. How many titles you can get? And you're thinking like, where do we go? Well, first we go, and then we think about the downtown Episcopal Church. Yes, I did think about that, because I could not bear to end this without mentioning him. Because when you go by there, it's right there. When you get to the bank, right there, you'll see it. And you'll say, did he know that he would be the name of an Episcopal church? Indeed not. Okay, so we'll let that part go. But we will note he is very important. And I would like to ask those who are at St. Dunstan's, I might grab them and try to force them into, tell me about St. Dunstan's. But I could be arrested for that, so I'm not going to ask. I'm not going to ask. Marnie?
That's my church.
Is that right? What an interesting history there. Beautiful, beautiful church. We used to have our history dinners there. Got quite a history of involvement in the community. In any event, he was the Archbishop of Canterbury for Edgar, and what's interesting to him is, and we're using an ugly word, and I want you to, I know, he was a nepotist. I know. He had, and a pluralist. I know. I heard the groans. You're hurting just like I am. Because I don't like to call people bad things, but he didn't mean to be bad. So if you're going to take him to the church court, and I don't think he was trying to get money. I just think it was like, how do we say that? He needed the resources.
People remote over there in Glastonbury.
Yeah, Glastonbury, that's right. And he became the abbot there, and he was Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'm thinking, cha-ching. But then I was thinking about my own filth and love of money and judging him by those standards, because he was going to use it all for scholarly purposes. You are mighty right. You took the words right out of my mouth, because it's all about the monastic aims, and he is assistant. And how close is he to Edgar? Yeah, they were tight. And you say, gosh, there was not a conflict. Indeed not. Times will change all that, but for right now, it's beautiful. They are loving each other, and Edgar says, do what you need to do. And nobody says you're a disgusting pluralist. No, I think it's fine. your abbot here, your archbishop here. And you know, he'd been a bishop too, yeah.
The connection, as I understand it, is he's a patron saint of several things, but not the least of which scholars. And the
Of what?
scholars.
Oh, well, that's a perfect role
And
for him, because he was a
blacksmith.
great scholar himself.
And
Between that, and you know, he also had a fight with Satan. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like, this is me with guns, right, ready to draw. Come on, devil. Yeah, I mean, the stories of St. Dunstan, so think about that in church next time. But yeah, St. Dunstan, and to end this, it's just the patronage of the monasteries. And we see this as very important in terms of the recovery of scholarship, the beginning of life. Now, the issue of bringing the Danes in on all of this is another issue, and a strange one when we think about ending with Dunstan's and, of course, Edgar's period, and then somehow by the 11th century ending up with Normans is a very, very strange business, but a very important one, because we don't say farewell to the English, but we just say welcome from another group, because the Danes are here and they're not going back to Copenhagen. So they are part of our community now. And how they eventually emerged is a story that I'm sure most of us don't know, but it's an interesting one. The English kings are, according to genealogists, and Marty, you may know something of this, that Elizabeth actually, the late Elizabeth, claimed descent from the House of Wessex, and I find this interesting. But whatever the case, that's a long way, as we know about family history. In any event, there is no question about the significance of Alfred and his family to English history, even if another people whose name has 2 syllables and 6 letters, Norman, is about to appear on the scene and change it in a way that even the Danes had not. And we'll start there next time. Thank you all. Thank you.